On today's episode, Dr. Liz and I welcome Kirsten Davidson to the show. We break down internal family systems therapy, and she provides some tips to help couples first become more aware of their own emotions and parts of their being, and then helps them move forward in healthy ways. Kirsten Davidson is a registered psychotherapist and founder of Mind the Gaps Psychotherapy in Ontario, Canada. Kirsten helps individuals and couples move out of disconnection and stuck patterns into more intentional, connected ways of living, using a trauma-informed approach grounded in internal family systems and relational therapy. We hope you enjoy the show. Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the Stronger Marriage Connection podcast. I'm Dr. Dave here at Utah State University, alongside Dr. Liz Hale, our psychologist, and we're aiming to bring you the very best that we have in research and resources, along with a few tips and tools to help you create the marriage of your dreams. All right, today we're diving into something a lot of couples feel but don't always know how to talk about: why relationships can start to feel disconnected and what it actually takes to rebuild real connection, which we're all about here on the podcast. We're joined by a therapist who helps couples move beyond avoidance and into more honest, courageous relationships, even when that means leaning into discomfort. Really glad you're here. Welcome to the show, Kirsten Davidson.
Thank you so much, Dave and Liz, for having me. It's a pleasure.
We're thrilled to have you on, Kirsten. Before we jump in, can you share a bit about your professional journey? What made you want to dive into the deep waters of being a psychotherapist and help people with relationship challenges? This is not an easy area.
Yes, absolutely. And you get mixed feedback, right? From people of, oh, you're a couples therapist. It's either, oh, that's so cool, or, oh, wow, you're brave.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So it dates way back, me wanting to be a therapist, back to childhood. But in terms of going into relationships, witnessing marital dynamics and family building and breaking and building and breaking throughout my personal life growing up was a really big catalyst. So the long and the short, both my parents have been remarried multiple times. I've had a total of 7 step-siblings throughout my life, lived in over 14 different homes before the age of 20. So lots of rupture and repair. And that's what couples therapy is rupture and repair. And so, although at the time I didn't know it, those lived experiences were kind of shaping my interest and also ability to connect with people going through that type of rupture and repair.
Wow. All kinds of stuff. And I had to mention, Kirsten, your background. I mean, for our listeners, you got to go on and check out some of it. She actually had a pretty creative background, a bunch of stuff that you've created, you have on the wall. I just have to point that out because it's unique, I guess is the right word, right?
Some of that was from childhood even, right? Some of those times.
Yeah, a lot of this was, so what Dave's referring to, for the people who can't see, are my whole background here in my studio is my artwork. And a lot of it I created in high school, and a lot of it is to do with our lived experiences and the nature of the mind. So yeah, very trippy.
Yeah, very trippy indeed. Yes. Can you kind of give us the background scoop? Some of this happened, right? Speaking about childhood and part of who you are, can you give us the quick rundown of what's going on behind you?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is my recording studio, also my office, also my art studio. So it's a mix of everything, but all my artwork behind me, a lot of it I did when I was in high school and younger. One of the pieces I did for my therapy office, but always since I was little, my artwork reflects something to do with psychology, something to do with the nature of the mind. So I can speak to this one here. It's a triptych. The TV's covering it a little bit, but for anyone who has heard of Plato's allegory of the cave, philosophy theory on how things are not always what they seem. So we can see there's a shadow of a tiger, can see a little bit closer. I don't know if you can really see it here, but the tiger is actually made up of butterflies. And then we can see the furthest picture is the butterflies are kind of flying, and there's a puppeteer controlling the butterflies. So that's a take on the allegory of the cave, which is we don't always know what we're seeing. And oftentimes it's just a mere shadow of something that we think is monstrous and we think is much more dangerous than it is. So also kind of speaks to survival mechanisms. But yeah, that's just an example of one.
Well, no, yeah, thanks for sharing.
You have a gift. I think that's pretty
thank
cool.
You.
It had to have been so therapeutic.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And so it's part of your office now, which I think is wonderful. Who better to be a therapist, Kirsten, than someone who has gone through what you have as with your parental system and multiple marriages. And that really sends us seeking, doesn't it? Seeking of, gosh, how can we do this well? How can nothing and everything administer to our education here? So good for you. You know, speaking of today, when you're working with clients now, what do you see most often? What are we most struggling with in our relationships, please?
Yeah, great question. I think one of the main things I see in my work is communication breakdown, but not just the general communication breakdown more specifically related to assumptions. So when we assume we know what our partner is thinking or feeling or why they're doing the things they're doing, we end up hurting our own feelings. I say hurting our own feelings because often our partner is not actually intending to hurt us. I would say 99.99% of the time when we hurt our partner, it's by accident. And so assumptions, right? And then we kind of I sit with couples and we break down, well, what did you actually mean by that? They can hear the true intention versus outcome. And then there's this coming together of, oh, like you weren't deliberately trying to hurt me there. So I think more open communication squashes those assumptions, and they kind of sit there like, wow, if we'd have just talked about what we meant there, we could have ended this whole thing.
Do you see that? Is that any different than what it has been? You've been doing therapy for a bit. You're young, but have you seen any kind of shift through the years?
Yeah, I would say it seems to be pretty consistent in terms of people coming to couples counseling for the first time, especially. They maybe aren't used to having these vulnerable conversations. So it seems to be a very common theme. I would say pretty consistent throughout my career that all of a sudden there's this light being shed on things that they both thought they knew about each other. And then it's like, oh, wow, that thing I thought I knew about you, I didn't know about you. That's not a fact. Yeah.
Vulnerable conversations, we're not really often, many of us are not used to having those. We didn't grow up with those necessarily, didn't have them in other relationships. And we don't know how to do it.
I'm curious with that. I mean, what's going on underneath? Is there something deeper, right, that's going on emotionally for people underneath all that?
Absolutely. Oh, where do I begin? So when we talk about, the style of communication, when someone tends towards internalizing, so kind of withdrawing, not asking questions, back to that assumption piece, it's usually because they're nervous about the answer, about the truth, right? So they might not want to initiate the conversation. They think that by initiating conversation over something their partner has done, specifically maybe done to them or around them, and they're feeling hurt by that. What I hear often is, well, I don't want to fuel the fire. Like, I don't want to stir the waters. I don't want to cause problems. And so often what I'll say with clients is, we're not adding fuel to the fire. We're actually trying to put it out. Like, if you can speak to your partner in that moment and express it, you're putting out the fire that was already there. And that can help shift a little bit, because it's like, oh, okay, I'm not making it worse here.
We'll be right back after this brief message. And we're back. Well, let's dive right in.
Yeah. So common themes that you hear, common fears, I guess, that you hear again and again from couples.
Common fears?
Yeah. What's happening emotionally? What are they coming with? Or is it just unique to every couple?
Definitely unique to every couple. But just to name a few, fears would be having to sit in the discomfort during a session. Things might be quote unquote going well. And I'll tease my clients that I have a relationship with that, like, did we not get in any fights this week because we communicated, or did we not get in any fights this week because we avoided something that was happening?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Which one is it? Yeah, I like this. So you often use the phrase self-led in relationships. What I find so interesting, I love this idea, along with, hurting my own feelings. That's brilliant. What does it actually look like in everyday life, the self-led?
Yeah, being self-led in terms of the work that I do actually comes from a therapeutic intervention called internal family systems theory.
IFS. Yeah.
IFS. Yeah. You guys are familiar with IFS?
You bet.
Yeah. So that is a framework that supposes that we all have, theoretically, this family of parts inside of us. I always reference those movies Inside Out for people to kind of conceptualize the little creatures that live in your brain. So we have an innumerable amount of parts inside of ourselves. And with couples, what happens is there are quote unquote parts wars. So there might be a part of you that really wants to connect, and there's a part of them that really needs distance in that moment. And then we have this kind of clashing or this push-pull between parts. I love this parts language because it acknowledges that we are not fully our emotions. These emotions are just mini experiences. These parts are versions of us that existed way back, usually under the age of 10, that have kind of been frozen in time. So we see when we're sitting with couples, if we can get each other to look at each other as being younger versions of themselves, there can be more compassion. But needless to say, self-energy is when you are able to speak to these parts of you, befriend these parts of you, and get them to kind of part as clouds away from the sun, which is you. So self-energy is just you, no parts, just your authentic, curious, creative, connected, courageous version of you who knows what to do inherently. So this is the whole, we're coming home to ourselves rather than building up some new version. We're just tuning back into who we've always been. That's what self-led means.
And you mentioned clouds right there, Kirsten. You often mention or bring up metaphors in your work with couples. Why do you think those resonate so much? And is there one that you find yourself coming back to again and again?
Yeah, metaphors. Oh, even already in this conversation, you've heard me drop a few.
Yeah.
I use them all the time. I think that comes through in my artwork as well. So anything visual has always helped me very deeply. So with clients who are more visual and more imaginative, I speak to metaphors because they tell a story. And as humans, we're designed to be drawn to stories, right? We remember them, we pass them on. They're also more interesting and they're more relatable. So whenever something comes up for me, like a metaphor, I just go with it and see, did that land for them? And most of the time they're like, oh yeah, like now we can now speak that way to each other in partnership. We can say, whatever the metaphor that came up in the therapy session was, we can bring that home and have that be almost an inside joke as well. So it holds that dual purpose there. It helps in the session and then also becomes a thing between the two of them outside of the session.
Yeah, love it.
Well, sad with that and being too loaded, right? It has a lightness to it when you can present that in session and we can take it home and utilize it. I think that's just really lovely, Kirsten. A lot of us grew up with this idea that the right relationship should just feel easy. Even those in the field, sometimes I still kind of get caught up in that same belief, like, oh, why is this so hard? And there's something really wrong here. How do you help couples rethink conflict or tension when it inevitably is going to show up?
Yes, I love that you say it's inevitably going to show up, because it is. I think so many people think that, oh, we never fight. Like, if that's true, there's probably some avoidance happening. So yeah. And I think so that comes to, what does healthy conflict look like? And first thing that comes to mind is the difference between dialogue and debate. right? So we can have dialogue without it becoming a debate. Debate is leaning more towards I'm right, you're wrong. We can't see eye to eye. Dialogue is how do I have the humility in that moment to set down what I'm thinking and just try and embody what they're thinking, even just for a moment, and what that would be like. Now, that's easier said than done. What that involves is two people being confident and brave enough in themselves to feel safe not being right. If that makes sense, like to acknowledge, if I'm not right, what does that mean? If there are parts of themselves that are scared to acknowledge, that there might be another valid perspective, then that's something to take to individual counseling too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Kirsten, for someone listening who feels, maybe a little stuck, whether they're dating or they're married, what's, I guess, one small shift they could make to start showing it more honestly in their relationships?
Yeah, feeling stuck and honesty. I think honesty, just as you say those two things together, to me, honesty is the thing that frees someone from being stuck. So being more true with yourself and what you can bring to the table, also being radically honest about what your partner can bring to the table and what they're willing to bring to the table is kind of where that repair happens. So shifting from that stuck state to this kind of movement flowing, working together state does involve radical honesty. Again, to be radically honest, you have to be able to look inward and say, what are my limits right now? Like what's blocking me from going further? What's blocking me from saying how I'm really feeling? Or what's blocking me, say for someone who's really hot-tempered, what's blocking me from taking it down a notch and speaking and sitting like eye to eye with my partner instead of feeling like I need to overtake them in that moment? So we have to be able to, so much of couples work is individual work, right? It's so much of it is looking at what am I as an individual bringing to the table or not.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would like to say that a happy, healthy we consists of a happy, healthy me, right? Getting ourselves whole and maybe not whole, but just working, right? A work in progress. Yep. Do you have examples or stories of couples and what they did specifically to turn things around?
Yeah. A couple come to mind off the top of my head. There is one couple I work with who, over the years, they shifted from what we would call in emotionally focused therapy, this like approach type of fighting patterns, or you could say attack. So these two that like one gets riled up, the other gets riled up. And the more each of them raise their voice, the more the other feels the need to compete to be heard. And over time, through going over kind of what you brought up, Liz, like how do couples navigate fair fighting, basically? Like how do we have disagreements, but then have it turn into dialogue instead of a debate? They developed this beautiful humility as individuals to say like, wow, it takes much less energy to lay down my sword. And it's a win-win because the other person's going to validate you generally when you're going to validate them. And the way that they shifted primarily was because they were so fatigued. We see this with couples all the time. They come in and they're like, I'm so done. I hear that all the time. I'm so done, so tired. Like I'm exhausted. Sometimes in that state, like that's when they're the most open to alternative options, right? And we see that they're like, I'll do anything at this point. We can't keep doing this. And I've been working with them now for almost 4 years. And last year they got engaged and they were the first couple I ever saw. So that was very rewarding.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
We'll be right back after this brief message. And we're back. Well, let's dive right in.
I mean, if you had if you could just have the megaphone right to the world and say, hey, if you get, or maybe you have all women in a room, you got all men in a room, is there advice? Is there tips that you would share, that you're seeing now with these patterns? You'd be like, man, if only more people would stop doing this or start doing more of this. What would you say? You can share it with the world. What's the advice or tips?
I love that. I think first thing that comes to mind is no one is trapped in their psyche. Like no one is doomed to the way they were raised or what their biology is. So if someone's coming into a partnership and they're saying, well, this is who I am, take it or leave it, and the behavior is not helpful, it's harmful, then one or both partners are like, well, I guess this is it. I guess they can't change. So megaphone to the world, you are not stuck. Like everyone has the ability to shift. Everyone has the ability to release things that are not helping them. And I think we get stuck in this kind of like objectified, labels can get in the way of that. Of well, I'm just this way. This is just how I am, and it's simply not true. I mean, the science shows it that neuroplasticity and epigenetics, the way we interact with the world, with our partners, with everything we do shifts the way that we can show up. So yeah, if ever you're feeling that this is just me, or you're hearing that from your partner, to kind of slow down and get curious about why that's their belief. Because it's, with all the love in my heart, it's just not true.
It's just not true.
Liz and Kirsten, I've got a question for both of you guys, right? For our listeners, you probably know I don't do private practice. So I'm curious with each of you, do you find that sometimes individuals, couples come in almost as a last resort? Like Kirsten, you said that, I'm done, I'm finished with this. Is there a message, I guess, for our listeners who are not quite at that, I am done, I'm fed up, maybe emotionally divorced already in my head, but that are really kind of, going that direction? So what I'm saying is that, do you want counsel or tips for people to say, come in and get help before it's way down, the train has left the station and it's this trying to repair something that has been ruptured for years? Does that make sense? I guess, do you have a message for the world of those who are struggling not to wait years and years to find out?
Mm-hmm.
Kirsten, my friend.
Okay.
I'll help.
Yeah. And what you're talking about there, Dave, that difference between proactive and reactive. Couples counseling, I think forever has been regarded as a reactive last resort type of measure. And there's so much stigma around it, around like, oh, you're in couples therapy, maybe something's wrong there, right? So I think on a systems level, we have a problem in terms of how everyone, not everyone, but majority would say, regard couples therapy. And this feeling of either being above it or being quote unquote bad enough to need it. And if we could switch that would be so beautiful. If we could normalize that, every couple, go see a counselor every once in a while to process their patterns, I think that would be really lovely. And there wouldn't be as much stigma. There wouldn't also be this sense that there's a shame around it. Like I see a lot of shame from couples that come in.
Right?
Still, right?
This time.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Liz? What do you think?
And even just as Dave's heard me say before with some couples, after they'll tell me their story, they look at me and they say, are we just like the worst couple you've ever seen? Bless them, right? Just that shame and that doubt and that wondering of, can we really get through this? Because they are exhausted. Do I wish couples would come in sooner? Oh, yes, I do. Do I ever think it's too late? No, but I do wish they came in sooner. Why? Because I think we could have less pain to have to resolve, right? Less damage, maybe. A little bit more damage control. But I am so hopeful. And sometimes that's what I bring most to the room sometimes. Kirsten, you might feel the same way, is just hope. When they've lost all hope, I'm still the one standing for them, waving that white flag, believing that I sometimes use the term couples education versus couples therapy, because I think that's so much what we do. And I think education becomes therapeutic in a way, but it's education. Few of us know how to do this thing called marriage until we get in and get some support and some knowledge. strengthen a muscle that's been weak. So much of it is education to me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, there can be a lot of empowerment when they are learning too, is what I notice. They hear something and they go, oh yeah, that relates and helps explain what we've been experiencing. If there's a term for that, I must not be so crazy. I must not be so alone. Like, we hear the shame kind of starting to dissipate from them understanding that there are terms to describe what they're going through. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Kirsten, I'm going to pick your brain here for this more selfishly, right? I have a daughter who's a married daughter. They have little babies, and I have another daughter who's just celebrated 1 year being married, and I have another daughter, third daughter, that is getting ready to be married here in about a month. Just from your perspective, kind of, young years, newlywed years, first together. Do you have tips, advice, right? And I can just I'll be able to take this episode and say, all right, girls, here, let's do Kirsten.
This is for you.
Yeah, this is exactly for you. And really for all. I mean, there are many of our listeners kind of in the beginning stages, but you have kind of some tips, some advice to kind of get on a better path, form better habits.
Yeah, I love that. I think that when we're talking about early phases of a long-term relationship, there can feel like there's a lot of pressure. Surprisingly, like, I love that you bring this up, because surprisingly, I have worked with a lot of couples that are engaged and their wedding is coming up, say, within the same year. And that's when they seek out help, because they maybe have not addressed some of the long-standing patterns or even new patterns that have emerged. So if I could give any advice to either newlyweds or people that are just got engaged or they're thinking of long-term partnership, it's, first of all, be able to understand what it's like to be in self-energy. So to bring it back to that dialogue we were having a few minutes ago around what does it mean to embody self-energy? Well, that means to be leading from a place of love and not a place of fear, from a place of confidence, not a place of insecurity. If you on an individual level know what it's like to embody your true self and to not feel all of those parts kind of taking over, then you and your partner as well, you and your partner can show up and note and name those moments in the moment. Things are going so well. Why are they going so well? Explore why things are going well. People don't often explore why things are going well. People will explore when things are not going well, which is also important. But to explore, like, why is it working so well? And I'm bringing this up because when it's to do with like newlyweds or weddings coming up, there's a lot of excitement, right? That's maybe someone at their best. So then we can explore, why is it going so well right now? How can we sustain this? And I know, the honeymoon phase will not last forever, but if there's a lot of self-energy around these beautiful milestones, that is the perfect place to get a benchmark of why we collaborate well in these moments. For the couples that are struggling in those moments, and maybe it's bringing out the parts of them that are clashing, right? Maybe wedding planning's not going so well, or, after the wedding, it's not what they thought. Then that's also a moment, right? That's also an opportunity to revert and explore back. Well, when were things clicking? Why aren't they clicking now? So really, because I take such an IFS informed approach to my work, it's hard for me to separate that out. So just speaking from that self-energy, if everyone who's getting into long-term partnership can acknowledge when a part has taken over, that's huge, because they can say, oh, you know what? Right now I'm feeling extremely angry, right? That doesn't feel like me. That just feels like a part of me. And I want to talk to you about that. Well, that's huge. That's mindfulness in action.
Yeah. In a very healthy way, right? Anger sometimes can be such a turnoff, or something we want to avoid. Oh no, here it comes. Here it comes.
We'll be right back after this brief message. And we're back. Well, let's dive right in.
So with going back to parts, can you just name some of the parts for our listeners with IFS, information families?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, internal family systems therapy.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Yeah, so parts can be quite literally anything. There are no bad parts, if you will. There are parts that are trying to protect you. And usually they're doing a pretty bad job, but they're trying. So I'll give an example. So in a partnership, one we see often is a part in both couples that really needs to be right and really needs to explain themselves. And that part, likely on an individual level, is protecting one of the partners from a plethora of things: feeling stupid, feeling worthless, feeling unlovable. Like, it could go as deep or as shallow as you can imagine. And these parts are stepping in and fighting really hard for their person to try and get them to not feel those things. You know, the not so fun outcome is that usually that's exactly what ends up happening, because the partner is frustrated by that defensiveness. They're not feeling validated. They might also be getting defensive. Both of them are left feeling maybe not as lovable as before, or maybe not as intelligent as before. So that's just an example of one part. But if we think of these parts as any emotion you can imagine, it always has some type of protective mechanism.
Yeah. Yeah. If a couple wants to know more about internal family systems, is there a book you recommend? Do you have a favorite?
Absolutely. Yes. So Dr. Richard Schwartz is the founder of the theory. And I would recommend the book called No Bad Parts by him. He has a few, but I think that's a great starter because it really gives it more layers, but in a way that is very understandable. For therapists out there listening, I would recommend the Internal Family System second edition on the actual therapeutic intervention.
Oh, thank you for both of those. That's great resources. You're helping so many people. Kirsten, where can our listeners go to find out more about you and the other resources you offer, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So to find out more about me, you can go to my website, which is mindthegaps.co. And from there, we have links to all of my social media platforms. I have a podcast I used to run. I also write for Psychology Today and do quite a few community interactions. But yeah, I offer virtual therapy and also in person in Ontario.
Oh, good. And what's your podcast?
My podcast is called Mind the Gaps. And that's also the name of my therapy practice, Mind the Gaps Psychotherapy.
Good for you. We will add those resources to our show notes for an easy find. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Very helpful. Kirsten, before we let you go, we have a couple of questions for you. We like to ask all of our guests. The first one is, what do you feel like is a key to a stronger marriage connection?
Key to a stronger marriage connection: the courage to be vulnerable, as cheesy as that sounds, the courage to be vulnerable. I say courage because it is so brave to admit when we're not feeling ourselves or we're not feeling safe. I think there's a lot of stigma around tears as being weakness or anger as being weakness, and to just name, like, you know, I'm feeling this way right now and I'm not feeling like myself is so incredibly brave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And to be able to do that with a partner receiving it is a huge test too, that if I can be that way and my partner receives that, beautiful, they'll probably deliver that back. And now we're stronger for it.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Do you have a take-home message for our listeners today?
Yeah, I think take-home message through listening about IFS and about what it means to be self-led would be, if this is new language for you, then strongly encourage an exploration of your emotions as pieces of you, even in day-to-day. So small mindfulness exercise would be when you start to feel overtaken by anything, even joy, right? Like quite literally any type of really strong, like powerful emotion, or maybe like a part that feels really low and really numb. Any part that doesn't quite feel like you, to just notice and say, oh, well, that's, it's a part of me. It's not all of me. And just get to get curious about that, I think, is so huge.
Mm-hmm.
There's a part of me. I really love that languaging. There's a part of me. It's really angry right now. It's a part of me that wants nothing to do with you right now. There's a part of me. I think it's lovely.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, Liz, what about you?
I've never heard this hurting my own feelings. I'm doing that in my interpretation and my assumptions. I think that's really great. It reminds me a little bit about the story I tell myself is, right? The story I tell myself or how I'm hurting my own feelings is. I really like that, Kirsten. Dave, what about you? What stands out most to you from our conversation with Kirsten Davidson?
Yeah, you know what? Going back to the beginning of what we were talking about, kind of that healthy, happy you. If you're just not feeling, if you're off, if you need a process of things, whether it is past trauma, whether it's current difficulties, whatever that is, resources, turn outward to some resources, get some help. There's so much good information out there, resources, therapists, relationship, marriage education. It takes intentionality. It takes work, but it is worth it. Don't cut things off and let things build for years and years and years before things explode and then you get help. But even if you have and things are really rock bottom right now, still, as Liz talks about, like, reach out. There's still hope for couples. Yeah, if both are willing to put in the work. So, Kirsten, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Ontario. We sure appreciate having you on today.
Thank you so much, Dave and Liz. This was such a pleasure.
I could hear just a little bit of that Canadian touch, which I just love.
Yeah. I do too. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yep,
a little bit. Yeah. I love it. Don't lose it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right, friends, that does it for us here. We will see you next time on another episode of the Stronger Marriage Connection podcast. That's right. And remember, it's the small changes that create a stronger marriage connection. Take good care of you and each other.
Thanks for joining us today. Hey, do us a favor and take a second to subscribe to our podcast and the Utah Marriage Commission YouTube channel at Utah Marriage Commission, where you can watch this and every episode of the show. Be sure to smash the like button, leave a comment, and share this episode with a friend. You can also follow and interact with us on Instagram at Stronger Marriage Life and Facebook at Stronger Marriage. So be sure to share with us which topics you loved or which guests we should have on the show next. If you want even more resources to improve your marriage or relationship connection, visit strongermarriage.org, where you'll find free workshops, e-courses, in-depth webinars, relationship surveys, and more. Each episode of Stronger Marriage Connection is hosted and sponsored by the Utah Marriage Commission at Utah State University. And finally, a big thanks to our producer, Rex Polanis, and the team at Utah State University, and you, our audience. You make this show possible. The opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views of the Utah Marriage Commission